tampering with evidence. And that's after she originally told officers on Friday that little William Cunningham was missing. She changed her story over the weekend, leading them to a hall closet inside an apartment where police found the boy's body. So what happened here? Birch now says that William fell down some steps. She gave him some ibuprofen, and the next day, he was dead. The coroner says the boy had been dead at least 48 hours when he was found on Saturday. William Cunningham's family held a vigil after finding out about his death. The news absolutely devastating his family.
I just want to let y'all know that he was a very good. And also, once again, whoever did never get to meet him, he will make you smell your worst day. This family didn't deserve what happened to him.
We just want to know why. Like, I mean, the princess child can't help himself. We just want to know why.
That was my great-grandchild, the third great-grandchild, and it's just really been a tragedy, you know, but just all we need to do is just find some justice and some peace with the situation.
This is a tragedy, but was it homicide? Now, one of the questions a lot of people are wondering is why Marquita Birch was watching the little boy for several days. Well, his mom says it was not uncommon. Join me tonight in Los Angeles, defense attorney Brian Claypool. In Atlanta, family law and defense attorney Pilar Prinz, and HLN law enforcement analyst Mike Brooks. Mike, let me start with you. I look at this case, and first thing that strikes me is that she's lying. She's lying about a missing child. I've heard this before, Mike. I've heard this one before. In this case, it's a babysitter lying about a missing child. But anytime you lie about a missing child and that child ends up dead, in my book, you don't get the benefit of any doubt.
No, you don't. This baby was dead for 48 hours, not 31 days. But still, Vinny, I want to know what was, the mechanism of injury of this little boy. They said it was head trauma. Why did they only charge her with abuse of a corpse? Are they waiting for additional evidence? When the child fell down the steps, why didn't she call 911? What was the child? How was the child after he fell down the steps? How many steps did he fall down? Did he fall down? Was he thrown down the steps? These are all questions that remain unanswered in this case, Vinny. It's crazy.
Well, we don't have questions answered, Brian, because we've got someone who has lied. And in my book, once you lie once about a missing child, anything else you say, I'm going to look at it and say, well, really, let's see if that can be proven. And from my perspective, that's got to be what investigators are doing at this point, right? Because they can still charge her with homicide if they gather more evidence. And I can't believe anyone's taken this woman at her word, at least not at this point.
Yeah, Vinny, where there's smoke, there's fire, and you're right on target. I think what's happening here is the district attorney has charged her with some lesser crimes to make sure she's incarcerated so she's not out on the street. And then in the meantime, they're gonna ramp up their case and get the evidence they need to eventually charge her with homicide. And the autopsy report is going to be crucial in this case, as Mike was alluding to. We're going to need to see, for example, were there any ligature marks on her neck? That's really important. Any bruising, important. Basically, the cause of death is going to be crucial here. And the thing that blows my mind out is two things. Why is she first calling for the child being missing if she didn't do anything wrong? And second, what's she doing giving ibuprofen to a 1-year-old? I've got a 6-year-old, and I know at 1, you're not supposed to be giving a child ibuprofen.
Pilar, consciousness of guilt, that's something we talk about often, and there's a charge that a judge can instruct jurors on down the road in different criminal cases. But in this one, the fact that your initial response to something going wrong while you were taking care of that child is to lie about that child and then to hide the child, to me tells me a lot about who you are, what your character is, and what you may very well have been up to.
Well, I agree, Vinny, and you haven't said it, but obviously we're all thinking Casey Anthony. It may not have been 31 days, it may have been 24 or 48 hours, but it raises a lot of questions, and what I want to know we haven't heard here is if this woman knew this mother and apparently sat for this child a lot, or even if she didn't, Why didn't she call the mother right away when this baby allegedly fed on the stairs? I'd want to check her phone records. Did she contact the emergency room? Did she call? You know, most pediatricians have after-hours care where you can call and find out information. I'd look, does she even have child ibuprofen in her house? Did she do any computer searching to see, Google, you know, what is the right amount of ibuprofen to give to a baby? There's so many questions right now.
And Mike Brooks, you talk about the initial charges in that case down in Orlando. I don't like to utter the words, Pilar, but you said them, I didn't, right? Those two magical words I don't say anymore.
I said them.
Yeah, you said them. But, Mike, in that case, that defendant was charged on lesser charges first as the investigation continued until they had enough.
Right,
homicide charge.
Right. I think Brian's right. These are holding charges until they find out exactly what happened. You know, and the other questions are maybe she didn't call 911 because maybe she had something on board. Maybe she was under the influence of drugs, alcohol, and was not properly caring for this child. But apparently, as you alluded to in the very beginning in the open, Vinny, this wasn't uncommon for this particular woman to watch this woman's little one-year-old precious baby boy. And, was she fit to do that? Sure sounds like she wasn't.
Yeah, Brian, possible charges that are out there, obviously, there's murder, there's premeditated murder, things like manslaughter. I mean, at a minimum, from what I'm hearing already, I think there would be enough for a reasonable jury to consider manslaughter in this case.
Yeah, I agree with you, Vinny. Make no mistake about it here. The district attorney is simply saying to the public, oh, she hasn't been charged with a homicide, because they're probably doing that for another reason, too. They probably want to get the guard down of Mrs. Birch, and maybe they'll get some kind of information out of her that might implicate her. If they come right out and say, oh, we're going to charge her with murder, she's not going to say anything. But getting back to your point, I think the appropriate charge would be manslaughter. At minimum, you get her on a negligent homicide, because at minimum, her negligence is what caused this child to die. The child's 1 year old. She's the custodian of the child. She has to be charged minimally with manslaughter, negligent homicide.
And Pilar, here's the thing, and this is what, stuck to me in that case down in Orlando, why that was so ridiculous, saying accidental drowning. You don't cover up an accident. Accidents happen. You could be a great person trying to do the right thing, and an accident can happen. We don't prosecute people for accidents.
Sure, but of course, one thing to remember is there's a difference between a mother and a child care provider. So, I could always make the argument that this woman was terrified. This infant fell down the steps in her care. She was charged with caring for an infant, and a horrible accident happened. And what she did was she panicked and she covered it up instead of doing the right thing. I'm not saying that's what happened.
I know you're not saying that's what happened. You're making the arguments that are out there. A lot more to talk about on this one, folks. Great way to stay on top of the story. Follow me on Twitter. It's my name, @VinnyPolitan. Very simple. If, in fact, charges are brought and I find out, I'll let you know. But you got to be following me in order to find out. Coming up, more on the babysitter charged in this case, but not yet charged with the death of this beautiful, beautiful baby.
Matters a relative of her nephew. She indicates to me that the child was accidentally injured. The child was engaged, gave the child some ibuprofen. When she checked on the child the next morning, the child had died.
The officers are requesting a high bond given the facts of the case. The victim is a 1-year-old child. She made a false police report that the child had wandered off. There was a lot of employees and man-hours involved in searching for the child before they realized that it was a false missing child report and the child was in fact deceased.
Those statements coming in a court hearing for Marquita Birch. She's charged with abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence in the death of 1-year-old William Cunningham. As you just heard, prosecutors say Birch first reported the child missing and then, more than a day later, led officers to his body. She'd been babysitting for the mother. My guests are back with me. Mike Brooks, if you had an opportunity to interrogate this woman, how would you do it? What would you ask her?
Well, I want to know what her past is. First of all, you want to know her whole background. Has she ever had any charges at all before you can work with? And just sit her down and say, look, help me to help you. That's the whole thing here. You didn't mean, maybe she didn't mean, to be involved in the death of this baby. Did the baby fall? Was the baby pushed down the stairs? Did something else happen with the baby? But why did she lie about it? If it's an accident, you can explain that. That's what you call 911 for, and you've got one scene. But now law enforcement has two crime scenes, if you will, Vinny. You know, what exactly happened where? Between Covington, Kentucky and Cincinnati.
Brian Claypool, how about, is there any chance of this woman, through either her own words or through her attorney, convincing authorities that she should not be charged with anything relating to the death of this child?
Well, I think at this point in time, she might be able to talk the authority out of being charged with manslaughter or second-degree murder, because the district attorney only has one chance to develop the requisite evidence to prove up a case beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think as time progresses in this matter, it's not on Miss Birch's side. For example, I was thinking during the break, where's the toxicology report on this? We need to look at the blood testing of the child as well as Miss Birch. I want to see what the level of ibuprofen was in the child's system. It's possible maybe this child asphyxiated on the drug, and then Miss Birch covers it up by saying she fell and tosses her down the steps. Also, what was Miss Birch's blood alcohol, or was she under the influence of drugs? I think the evidence through the autopsy report is going to develop the story here, and eventually I think you're going to see her charged with, I think, either second-degree murder, probably manslaughter.
Ballard Prinz, you know, you brought up an interesting point before about this being a babysitter versus a mother, and let's talk about that a little bit. You know, how about our system of justice? Who do you think our system of justice looks at more skeptically in a case involving the death of a child, a parent or a babysitter?
Well, I don't think there's really an answer for it, Vinny, because it depends who was with the child last. In this case, it's clear. We know that it was the sitter who was with her, so they're going to look.
No, not in this particular case. I'm saying in general, in cases where young children die.
Okay.
Who does our system of justice look at more skeptically? A mother who is caring for her child that dies, or a babysitter who is caring for someone else's child who dies? First
thing they're going to do right off the bat is going to be look at the parents. There's no question. But it still brings to your point, I think it's sadly, and this is every parent's worst nightmare, it's the parents who entrusted their precious child with this woman. I mean, did they do a background check? You'd be amazed at what you can find simply by doing a criminal background check on people. We don't even know if this woman had a history. What was her experience dealing with children? As we as parents know of young children, it's a lot different to care for a 1-year-old than it is to care for, say, a 5 or 10-year-old. And then the fact that this baby was in this woman's home instead of the baby being in its own home where the parents come home and see this child. I mean, I'd want to know if this baby allegedly found it on the steps, did they have a safety gate at the top of the stairs? No. I mean, if you're caring for a baby, that's the first thing you should do.
Yeah. And Mike, the sad thing here is I saw the mom, and she was just completely heartbroken and distraught, but she looked like a very young mother. Right. And, you know, I don't want to, it's tough. People are put in difficult situations, you know, and I don't know why the baby would be with the babysitter for days at a time. Sometimes I don't know if mom is out working. I don't know what their situation is, so I don't want to judge them at all tonight. But sometimes people are put in positions where, you know, daycare and night care and babysitting and everything else is difficult work. It's difficult to find someone to get the job done that you can afford to do, and sometimes this is what happens. From your perspective, Mike, though, let's pick it up. What can you do? What can a parent do that, say, doesn't have the means to hire a private investigator, doesn't have the means to hire a babysitter through some agency that does screening? What's the best way?
Well, in this particular case, Vinny, it's going to be law enforcement who's going to be doing the background on the defendant, and it's also going to be doing a background on the mom. You know, why was the mother leaving her child with this woman, you know, who was just a friend? Could it be possibly some child neglect on the mother's part on a regular basis? How often did this happen? You know, and why? These are all questions that law enforcement's going to look into, and they may get some answers.
Brian Claypool, does this strike you as a case that ends up going to trial if, in fact, there are homicide charges brought?
I absolutely think this case is going to go to trial, because Miss Birch is she's going to claim that, A, she didn't do anything wrong, and if they find out that she did do something wrong, she's going to say it's an accident. Mm-hmm. So she's going to fight this thing, and I think eventually you're going to see this case going to trial. I don't see any room for plea bargaining here. I mean, this is a serious matter. You have somebody taking care of a 1-year-old, and I think from a policy standpoint for people in the community, this district attorney is going to have to take this case to trial, because you can't fumble the ball like this. I've been a single parent for 4 years, and getting back to your other question, why weren't the natural parents here searching out a babysitter possibly through the church, through referral, somebody who knows the integrity of Miss Birch? I think that's a great starting point to get the right sitter for your child.
All right, everyone, thanks so much. Coming up in Ambition.